Well, we've arrived in Rothenburg for round 2. It got so nasty, the wind was blowing. You guys scoot over so they can see you. The wind was blowing and the snow had ice in it. It was blowing it right in our faces and it stung. So we were also afraid that the trains might stop running. We didn't know how bad it was going to get. So we're back today and we are having a little bit of rain, but nothing bad. And we're going to see some of the stuff that we missed last time. This is one of the main entrances to the city. As you can see, it's a pretty narrow passage right here. Pretty soon we'll be in a pedestrian-only area, but this part does allow cars.
One of Germany's greatest cities, and today it's one of the best preserved medieval towns anywhere.
Rothenburg is a 14th century town and it predates both Munich and Berlin. They were just stops in the road when Rothenburg was already a thriving city. And much of it is preserved today because it wasn't a target by the time World War II happened, and so it didn't get bombed, and almost all of its wall and many of its buildings are still intact and preserved today. So right now we're walking into the center of town to the main square where we'll see the Rathaus or the City Hall.
You're looking at the new town hall. It was built in 1570. This particular town hall was built in a Roman style. The arches you can see underneath have a Roman style with almost a Greek style gate. And you also notice on the building that you don't have a steeple, you have rounded edges. That gives you an idea that this was actually built in the Renaissance time period. This was a city that actually had a distinct honor from the Pope that it didn't have a prince or a potentate that was in charge. They were only responsible to the emperor in Germany. They actually exercised somewhat of self-rule.
This tall white building here in the town square was the Councilors Tavern, and it is now the Tourist Information Center, so it's pretty easy to find if you're here for the first time. And the clock on the building presents a little show. It has a couple of little doors that open and a man comes out with a beer stein, and there's a whole story behind it, but it's very long. Just suffice it to say, if you want to see the show, it goes off every hour on the hour between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. right here in the town square. And across from the town hall, many of the wealthy lived right here on the main square, and these were once very expensive, impressive mansions. All of these buildings that are now shops. And if you look here, you notice that next to the regular door is a very wide arch. That at one time would have actually been a door that was wide enough for the horses and the carts to pull into, and so that the people could get off under cover. So you'll see those large arches all through town as well. So as you can see on the front of this brown ornate building, this is the Baumeister house. The Baumeister was the man who built Town Hall.
It stands for Master Builder.
Right. And the statues there are the 7 virtues and the 7 vices. And you can see on the bottom level, the second one from the left with the big belly is gluttony.
I'm working on that one.
Mark says, He's working on that one, especially here in Germany. It's easy to do here.
What you're looking at is the St. George Fountain. It was a main source of water. It was more of a catch than a well, but it was a place where all of the commoners could come and get water. And up on the top you can see the statue of St. George on his horse slaying the dragon. This is one of about 40 that exist in the town that is still today after the Renaissance time period.
Yeah, they weren't destroyed in the war because this town was spared. And these long bars, let's go see if we can figure out how they work. They said these long bars here were something that they would attach their buckets to.
Yes, so that they would fill up with water. See the water spout out there?
Yeah, there's the spout.
So they could extend the bucket out to be filled from the center.
That's pretty cool.
Fresh water.
Because Rothenburg had all of these fountains, they were one of the few towns that didn't burn during the Renaissance. They had enough water to keep the fires at bay. And another interesting fact was that during times of siege or famine, they would sometimes even stock them with fish. And you can see that without this platform, this wooden platform in there, they could have filled it with a lot of water and probably stocked it with quite a few fish. So this house right here is typical of the half-timber style that you see all over both Germany and Switzerland. The red that you see is wood, and part of what made it red originally was ox blood, and they used ox blood to repel pests and help prevent rot. And then the white part that you see was filled in with rubble, sometimes including dung. That must have smelled great. And then covered up with plaster. And if you look up to the top levels, you'll see some doors that open out. And way at the top, I don't know if you can see it, there's a pulley. The top levels of the house were used for the storage of grain. And they could pull the bales and buckets and so forth up there. And then they stored them up there in what was essentially a multi-level attic. So this tunnel right here, I imagine, was just a passageway, and like today they have some of the booths here for the Christmas market. They may have had tradesmen that sold their wares here before, but I wanted to show you this architecture in here. It's super interesting. And the old windows, this is so typical of the time period. And look at all those spikes up there. I don't know if those were typical of the time period, but right now you'll see those a lot on old historic buildings.
To keep the pigeons off.
Yeah, to keep the pigeons from getting up there. Their droppings are extremely acidic, and New Yorkers will know that they even can erode stone, so they try to keep them off of the buildings as much as they can. Now we're going to take a look over here at this doorway, and as you see at the top, you see the two eagle's wings on either side of the double eagle, which symbolizes the Rothenburg's freedom from the imperial ruler. So they were a free city, which was quite a big deal back then. All over town you'll notice in the buildings these beaver tail shaped tiles. Tiled roofs came into fashion essentially after thatched roofs were outlawed because they were a fire hazard. And if you look closely on this roof over here, zoom in, you'll see a little kind of wrought iron fence at the bottom. That's to keep snow from falling off on people below. And we're now headed here to St. Jacob's Church. St. Jacob's is over 700 years old, and it is so big because Rothenburg at one time was the biggest city, and this was their main church. And you can see the spires up there that are built in kind of a prickly fashion. Those were typical in Gothic architecture to represent the flames of the Holy Spirit.
This is a statue of Saint Jacob, which is James the Apostle, and it's to symbolize he is the patron saint of the church here. He's holding, and you will always see him with the shell, which is a symbol of the Christian pilgrimage. The church originally was a place for people to stop on the way to the Holy Land, but later this became one of the pilgrimage stops on the way to Santiago, and you will find these shell reliefs on the ground in cities throughout Europe. In fact, in Brussels, you will find them in places where they offer sanctuary.
That's where we first learned about them, so it's really cool to see them in other places. And like Mark said, they represented sanctuary, a safe sanctuary for pilgrims who were seeking.
Now, I don't know what the deal is with rubbing on the finger, but it seems to be pretty popular.
Yeah, it looks like, well, maybe that's to give you blessings, or I'm game, I'll do it.
You're seeing is one of the most beautiful wood artworks, if not all in Europe, certainly in all of Germany. Tillman was the artist and was very renowned at that time. He was nicknamed the Michelangelo of Germany, and he carved this piece for the city about the same time that Michelangelo carved his statue of David. But this relief was here specifically to house the drop of Christ's blood.
So we think that the drop of what is believed to be Christ's blood is right there in the center of the cross.